chapter of the Shmone Prakim, Rambam's introduction to Yeshivat. So, we talked about the soul, the nefesh, being the tzura, the form of the body, by giving it its life and giving it its purpose and its value. And then we talked about the fact that the soul itself, even though it is surah for the body, it itself plays the role of chomer, of material, substrate, something that receives qualities, for seichel. And as I explained to you, seichel here means knowledge, not intellectual ability, cleverness, brilliance, and so forth and so on. The word intellect is very misleading in this context. And the intellect that you have is a process of acquiring knowledge. And the knowledge is the form of the intellectual ability. So it's the, so to speak, the form of the form, and it determines the purpose of the entire person. And therefore, he says, he quotes a verse from Proverbs, Gam b'lo das, nefesh lo tov. If there's no das, and here the word is das, not sechel and not chachma and not bina, but das. Lo tov, it's not good. It's not good. Because that knowledge which you achieve, that knowledge determines what it is you are to do, how you set your priorities, what you should dedicate yourself to, and that is the form of the form. It's the ultimate form of the person. And then he says there are many abilities in the intellectual part, the other parts of the. But I'm introducing this to talk about character traits, which was the subject of Prakim, and I'm not going to go into these things now. So now we come to the second chapter. The second chapter is very difficult. I'm sure I don't fully understand it. And its background for what he does later. What he does later, I think I understand better. So I'll do my best to explain it to you. And I'm just giving you the hit, not salute, as we say, the apology before I do it. He says, this chapter is about rebellion in the powers of the soul. And of course, rebellion is short for obedience and disobedience. In other words, it's the freedom to act on your own and to be commanded and to be responsible. How does that relate to the 5 elements of the soul, powers of the soul that we have described? And then there's also malos v'chesronos. Now, malos v'chesronos means better or worse states of being, where you say that that condition is a superior condition, and that condition is an inferior condition, which isn't the same as commands and prohibitions. It isn't the same as merit and criminal responsibility, but it is a distinction of value, distinction of condition of better and worse. So it has a relationship, as we'll see, to the idea of obedience and disobedience. So, having given that headline, he says, you should know that rebellion and obedience within what the Torah describes for these matters, he starts by saying they're only found in two of the parts of the soul. Now, he's going to sort of take this back as he goes along. So it means there are two for sure, and they are the Chelek HaMargish, where sensation takes place, and the Chelek HaMesor Dovad, the element of action. Action and sensation. That's where they are. And there are two. In these two, you have transgressions and mitzvos. It's interesting. He puts the negative first over and over again. But in the part that's responsible for physical survival and reproduction, which he called Zan, and in the part that's responsible for, now, Medama, which meant things that are similar to one another, and he talked about remembering sensations, and sensations being combined. There's no such thing as obedience, there's no such thing as disobedience. And the reason is this, he says. In order for there to be obedience or disobedience, mitzvos and averos, commands and prohibitions, whatever area you're talking about has to be accessible to the will. All these areas are active. They are operating to make things happen all the time. But if they aren't accessible to the will, then of course, command and prohibition isn't going to apply. So you say, okay, you ate supper, digested in exactly 42 minutes. Okay, but how do I do that? Or increase the flow of electricity from your spine to your left hand. Or the autonomic nervous system. These things aren't subject to your conscious will. Well, mitzvos are addressed to your will. And then the question is, what does your will have access to? So he says your will has access to the active, where action comes from. That's obvious. Actions take place when you decide what you're going to do. The active part, misorer, has in it your motivations. And with your will, you decide which of the motivations should express itself in action. So that's the realm of action itself. And then he says that's also true for the realm of sensation. Now here it's a little tricky. And I'm bringing here now, this is a big topic in philosophy. You're sitting here with your eyes open and you see a scene. You can't decide to see something else. It is what it is. I want to see red flags. Too bad. All you're going to see is the table and the camera and people and so on and so on. You can't control what you see. You could close your eyes. That you could do. You could shut the screen, right? When I put in my reading glasses, that changes what I see in the room. It's all fuzzy. So you have some control of what you see and how you see, and same with the other senses. But a great deal of what's there and you sense, you have no control over at all. The table is hard. Feel it as silk. You can't do that. It's hard. It's not going to feel like silk. So when he says you have control over sensation, I think he has to mean that you could control to a certain extent which sensations you will have. When I put in my earplugs at night, that shuts out the traffic from the street. So I can make sure that I don't hear the traffic from the street. So there's a certain amount of control my will has over the sensations that I have. And similarly, there's obviously control over the Misora, which leads to action directly. The Zan is things that go on automatically in my body, and typically I don't have much control over them. Now, of course, the digestive system, I could fast, and then I won't digest anything. And then I eat, and it digests. But the process of digestion, what takes place, which ashes are secreted at what time, how the system pushes the food through the whole tube, that's something which typically we don't have control over. So he says we don't have control over that. Yeah.
So we've got more control over what we expose the senses to, what the digestion system is exposed to, but the process itself is limited far more so in terms of...
Far more so. I should say it's not only a question of what you expose the senses to, but seeing often requires learning. And people who aren't taught don't see, and certainly for hearing. I mean, one of the things that I'm very much invested in is classical music. And you play a symphony and you ask them, what is the bassoon playing now? I don't know. Which one is the bassoon? What does it sound like? Sounds like this. I don't hear it. I just hear sound, glorious sound. But pick out the bassoon, Well, yeah, okay. You play an orchestra long enough, you'll pick out the bassoon. You can pick out each instrument. You can hear it separately. You can see exactly what it's doing. So there's a certain amount of training in perception that enables you to have sensations that you otherwise wouldn't have. So that's also an element where your will has a control over. There's something which we've all experienced. When you're looking for something, as you gaze, you see everything as background for that thing. And let's say you're looking for your watch, there might be a gold bar on your desk and you won't notice because you're looking for the watch. This is now ancient history. You can look this up in an ancient history book. There used to be people called proofreaders. And they used to check the spelling in written text, whether it was a newspaper or a book or whatever it is. And the big problem in training a proofreader was, while he's reading the text and he knows what the words mean, and he knows what the message is, he sees what he expects to see. And he doesn't see what's written. So, that being the case, you have to look at it a certain way to see what's really there. Shall I do this? Yeah, why not? I'll give you an example. I'll take it off.
I can bring it.
Okay.
They're in the pocket or maybe?
Yeah. I'm going to write something. Oh, where are the... I thought it was going to write.
Where are they?
They're usually up here with a magnet.
Usually. I just here 1 second. Let's just hope it works.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's hope it works. It works?
Yeah. Okay, what did I write? Yeah, okay.
Are you signing the Spain, the spring? What?
Yeah. What did I write? Surely you read faster than that.
Okay,
What did I write?
Paris in the spring.
Yeah, Paris in the spring.
The last word is undetermined.
Spring. Okay. But most people, when they look at this, they say Paris in the spring. And they miss the fact that there's two thes.
Yes.
Yeah. So you see.
But what I picked up was the lack of capitalization of the I. That's what
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
but you
the
but you
same
certainly
thing.
missed
Yes,
the the.
Yes.
Because you know it's Paris and Paris in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
spring and then the extra part you just don't see.
Exactly. So, and as you
This is a very famous psychological
As
thing.
you had said, look for the mistake. You don't find the mistake.
Oh, then that could have been. Okay. So anyway, now the one that it's going to cause me to maybe slightly, somewhat change what I said last time when we're talking about the medama. I told the medama it comes from domeh. Domeh means similar, and that way it creates categories. And then we said it is associated with images because he says, and image, the word, well, let's say it's sensations, because he says it records sensations and then later combines sensations into other combinations which may not have been found in experience. Well, that's true. But now he says your will has no control over it. Your will has no control over it. So if you think of what we call the imagination in English, you definitely have control over your imagination. You imagine things. You decide to spend time imagining. Think about a person writing a novel. He's imagining all the time. And then the Rambam says, the proof of it is that the Koach HaMadama works when you're sleeping, works in dreams. There, your will is not operating at all. It's happening to you. So I think now, what he means by the Koach HaMadama is something very narrow. It's having visions. Things, let me say the idea hit me, I was thinking of Chicago. I had a vision of so and so. The vision came into my mind, but it's something that works automatically. So I think that rather than imagination, where we create new ideas by putting things together and trying them out, and I talked about the creativity and then checking when you're discovering things and so forth and so on. The way the Rambam is describing it here, it isn't that voluntary capability at all. He's telling you here that your will has no access to it. It's just something that happens all by itself.
Is that Koach Madam? What's it called?
Medameh.
Madam. Thank you.
Yeah.
Today we were going over the sugya of you shall not covet, the ninth of the Ten Commandments.
The 10th of the 10 Commandments.
The tenth of the Ten Commandments, and we were saying that you only chayav when a person actually sells the thing that the person was pressing him to sell. So I was wondering, the actual thing is the prerequisite, meaning coveting, which is the prerequisite to the actual Stipler says that the coveting of the thing. So I was wondering whether or not the coveting has to do with this medam.
I don't think so, and I think that over there, what's motivating that. By the way, not all Shitas agree with that, but what's motivating those Shitas is this, and this is you shouldn't covet what other people have. So let me see. I'm walking down the street in Forest Hills. Wow, look at that house and those grounds. Whew. I wonder if it's for sale. I would give him $49 million for that. I wonder if it's for sale. I knock on the door and say, "Listen, tell me, are you looking for a buyer? Would you be willing to sell it? Have I violated one of the 10 Commandments? Oh, what a terrible thing to do." And suppose he puts up a for sale sign. Is he being machshil people? Is he tripping people up on one of the 10 Commandments? Because if they see for sale, they'll think, oh man, it's for sale. Maybe I would want to buy it. And then I'm going to go and see if I can negotiate for it. Is he tripping them up on one of the 10 Commandments? Clearly, wanting to buy somebody else's thing or putting up a for sale sign, which triggers your desire to buy his thing, is perfectly permissible, perfectly okay fine, nothing wrong with it, no demerits, and no punishment from God. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why there's only a problem if that desire leads you to put pressure on him when he doesn't want to sell, and use less than appropriate means to get the sale. But just wanting what somebody else. I mean, what do you do when you advertise? When people put out their stuff on the sidewalk, and they want you to look at it, and they want you to want it so they can sell it to you. So it can't be something criminal about wanting what somebody else has. That's what's motivating them there. It's not the psychology of it. It's the fact that what you're doing is perfectly permissible and appropriate. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the koach hamedameh.
Yeah.
That it in itself, it seems to be that it doesn't have a will, but I think like the way it's triggered, it's related with how the will has acted in certain things. Like.
Okay, I think a kind of indirect influence is possible. I agree with you.
Yes.
And I don't think the Rambam is talking about that. Because using indirect methods, you can affect almost everything. As I said, if you don't eat, then your digestive system won't digest. And when you do eat, it will digest. So he's not talking about that. He's talking about using your will to make it happen.
Okay.
Here you're using your will to eat, and then the eating will make it happen. But it's happens on an automatic pilot.
It sounds so similar to how music artists talk about they don't know how the ideas come to them, but they know the process with which to bring about these visions of novelty or creation, so to speak. So they have their process. They don't understand what's happening, but they know that they do all these different things, and they get that inspiration to then have something new come forth.
Yes, I think that the Greeks wrote about that. That's the muse. Under certain conditions, ideas occur to you. But again, they occur to you.
Yeah.
And our language in English for this is very indicative. It hit me. In a cartoon, the light bulb goes on. That's very indicative. It means it's a mystery. Just it comes out of nowhere. And of course, we understand how to attribute it. So I think that's what's going on here with the Kohen Hamadama. So now we have 4, the Zan and Madama, that where it doesn't apply, sensation, and Me'orah, which is the motivation and ability to act, where it does apply. Now what about the intellect? And that means in these 2 areas, what you see and what you hear, there are mitzvahs about that. What you should see and what you shouldn't see. What you should hear and what you shouldn't hear. So there definitely are mitzvahs in that area. And of course there are mitzvahs in terms of action in general. And therefore, right, okay.
Is the Rambam going to make the case that this idea of the vision that comes to mind can actually be willed into being, as opposed to just coming to us, that we can actually have some degree of control over it?
I don't know what that would mean. I told you, I can't just will to see red flakes here, because...
Maybe the example I'll use is something like lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming, okay. Where you have semi-conscious control, that's true. The dream interrupts you. Say, I want to go back to that dream. You fall asleep again, and then you go back to that dream. Okay. No, that's a borderline case. So he says, now he says, when you talk about malos, which are, it's like what I said before, a mala, it means a condition that's a good condition. Condition to be valued, to be worked on, to try to achieve. There, there are two types of good conditions. One are ma'alos of your midos, of your character traits. Some character traits are better than other character traits. And indeed, according to the Rambam, there's one of the 613 commandments is to produce in yourself good character traits. But then, like we said before, you said particularly, the mitzvah will be do those things that result in the cultivation of that character trait. So the mitzvah will be to do the actions. Like the Sefer Chinuch says, Adam nif'al lefi pu'ulosav, when you perform an action, that action acts on you. We don't often pay attention to this. The whole Western orientation is external, public, social. We don't pay attention to the fact that when you do something, it has an effect on you as well. But it does.
Who said that?
Sorry?
Who said that?
The Sefer Chinuch.
Thank you.
That's a refrain in his Sefer, that many mitzvos, when you perform the mitzvah actively, that has an effect on your character, and it's the effect on the character is one of the reasons why you're doing the act. And then there are ma'alos in the fifth section of the soul, which is the logic or intellect. And he's going to describe some of them. So now, it sounds like the intellect doesn't do anything. You do things which then affect the status of the intellect. So here, intellect is what I told you the other day. It's the knowledge that you have, not your reasoning capacity, not your investigative capacity, not the brilliance of your deductions. The goal is to have knowledge. And that capacity to have knowledge has better and worse conditions, namely, when the information that it accepts is true and well-founded, then it has knowledge. And if it's not true or not well-founded, then it's either false or foolish. So you can have a mitzvah to learn and to memorize, but you do that mitzvah by opening the book and reading the words out loud and discussing with other people. Those are actions. The result will be that in your intellect there'll be new information. So that's not that the intellect has mitzvahs applying to it, because it doesn't do anything. You do the studying, which results in an effect on the intellect. But it has better or worse conditions. Now he says one of these malos, these desirable conditions, are called chokhmah. Now, in the previous chapter, he talked about chokhmah of knowledge of abstract things that never change, and then there's knowledge of practical things which do change. They're both knowledge. And he says here, what's going on here? He says here that it's knowing cause and effect. And both immediate causes and chains of causes. That he calls chachmos. I mean, of course, again, it's a translation from the Arabic. Haseichel, Rimenu, Haskela Iuni, that applies to the abstract. And we have this created in us. And here he says Again, this is not ability to analyze, this is information. And he says that you are created with certain axioms in your mind, or as I said, with good and evil, they develop naturally through natural experience, which are not derived from anything else, and don't need to be justified by anything else. They don't need to lean on anything else. They're starting points for all thought. So, for example, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? Right. Hard to disagree with that, right? Somebody says, I don't know, prove it to me. So, sorry, I don't know anything stronger than that to prove it from. I don't know how to base it on anything that's more obvious than that is. Something like the transitivity of identity is a starting point for proving other things because it's more secure than anything else. 2 plus 2 is 4. And don't tell me, the smart ones, that in number theory we do prove that 2 plus 2 is 4. Yeah, we do. That's for the sake of organizing things or axiomatically. The proof of 2 plus 2 equals 4 in number theory doesn't make it any more certain. Indeed, if you had axioms in number theory which prove that 2 plus 2 is 5, they're wrong axioms. Get rid of them. Get different axioms. 2 plus 2 is 4 is one of those things which is obvious, clear, definite, certain in the mind. These are muskalos rishonos. These are first understandings. And then you use these first understandings to reason about everything else. So it's like Aristotle says, suppose you meet somebody, you're talking to him, and you have a discussion. You say, okay, so I see you're committed to A. You believe in A. So yeah, right. And you talk for a little while, and he says, it seems to be now you're saying that A is false. And he says, yeah, right. And you say, well, I don't get you, You said A is true, and I say A is false? He says, yeah, I said it's true, and I say it's false. Does it bother you? I ask, are you concerned about it? No, what's wrong with that? It's true, and it's false. The next thing you do is to offer him a cup of tea. Cut off the discussion. There's nobody home to talk to. If he doesn't recognize the contradictions are a problem, what are you going to accomplish by talking to him? Right? He's just out of the discussion. This is like muskalot rishonot. Oh, there are fine distinctions here, and there's a lot to be explained here, but okay. That's, Yeah.
In the previous paragraph, it says that wisdom, it says in my English translation that the study of entities that are unchanging is referred to as wisdom. And now it says the knowledge of immediate and distant causes is wisdom.
Yeah, so there are levels of wisdom. There's like wisdom, capital W, and then there are wisdoms, which are mastery of various different disciplines. I think that's what he means. Yeah.
And, Rabbi, what's the definition of the intellect? So if knowledge is what you have, what would be the definition of intellect?
Well, it's a very difficult issue. I think it was a guy named Gardner who said that there are at least 7 different dimensions of intellect. A psychologist, I think at Harvard, which means maybe there are, maybe there aren't. A working definition that I would give is intellect is the ability to learn from experience. Things happen, and now you know something new. And experience includes thinking about things, not just football games. So, you go through life and you acquire new knowledge by thinking in a certain way or ways. But it's a very poorly circumscribed concept, and it can have many different types of applications. So, I'm not. But my point is that intellect is a capability of going through a procedure which issues in knowledge. And my point was to distinguish the procedure from the product. That was the important point that I wanted to make. the form of the person is the knowledge, not the intellect. That's why I said the Greeks defined human beings as a rational animal. Reason is this intellect, it's this capacity to think and analyze and decide and test and so forth and so on. And for them, it was the possession of this capacity to do the reasoning that makes human beings unique. And for the Rambam, it's not true. What makes the human being, what fulfills the human being, what makes him complete, is the knowledge that he has, not the reasoning that he goes through. And indeed, I'm just thinking now, maybe I can use a test which only occurred to me fairly recently. If you're looking at our world and you're trying to figure out what's valuable, and in particular, what's valuable for itself, as opposed to what's just a means to something else, one test would be, do you possess it in the world to come? Because in the world to come, you will have everything of value. Nothing's missing there. Nothing to pine away for. Oh, I wish I had. And with that test, somewhat surprisingly, free will does not have intrinsic value, because in the world to come you don't have free will. So you've got to see free will as a means. Only a means. So to say free will is essential to a human being could mean, at best, it's essential to a human being that it should go through a period in which he had free will. But it's not part of the definition of a human being to possess free will, because that would imply that in the world to come we're not human. And I hope that's not correct. So, yes, so then what about the ability to reason? If the Rambam's description of the world to come is where you are enjoying your understanding of the essence of the Creator. Doesn't sound like you're doing research and deriving new conclusions and working out, solving contradictions and so on and so on. You've got it. And for reference, since I had forgotten this and I just rediscovered it fairly recently, at the end of the 8th chapter of Hilchos Tshuva, the laws of Tshuva, he says, the phrase that you find in Chazal, Nehni miziv hashchina, which means something like enjoying the shine of the Shekhinah, of God's presence, he says that means hasagas amitaso, grasping his essence, which he says a human being can't have when you're alive. And he quotes the verse, and I must say, I think the Rambam's use of the verse is a challenge to anybody who disagrees. The pasuk says, "Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai." Man cannot see me and live, which pretty clearly implies that after death he can see him. And see there is in response to a request that Moses made, Harini Nos Kvodecha, reveal to me, show me your kavod. And kavod, the Rambam says, means his essence. And Kodesh Baruch Hu said, not while you're alive, which seems to imply that when you're afterlife, you can have it. And in the 8th chapter of Hilchos Tshuva, he says it word for word that you do have it. And once you have it, there's nothing more to have. It's not as if you want to solve string theory and figure out whether it could be true or couldn't be true. That's not going to be an issue. Okay. So now, okay, and he talks about secular. Nicholas is not the place to talk about it. That's one of the ma'alos of the logical part of the soul. Another is zakus. Zakus means kind of clarity and purity. And tuva havana means the good understanding, the capability of good understanding. And he says this is the skill, the ability to understand things quickly, or instantly, or in very short time. And this is very important because there's an awful lot to learn. And if you're learning slowly, you'll never accumulate enough to be able to get to where the things are really deep. And the opposite of ma'al is chisaron. The state of this part of the soul which is lacking. They are the opposites of all these things that I told you that are good. So that's with respect to the logical part of the soul. Now all of this is background because Pirkei Avos is about the midos that a person has in his character, talking about your character traits. So now he comes finally to the point which is the introduction of these 8 chapters for this Masechta. The virtues, I guess you could call them, of the midos. They exist in the one part of the soul which is what produces action, because the midos of the person are what produce. They are his basic motivations, his values, what he desires, what he fears, and by the way, fear can be very good, right? I mean, certain things that are worthy of fear. That's where the midos lie, and in particular the good and bad midos lie. And he says the area of the soul that has the senses, that's only something that can be used as a tool to improve and create the malos, the virtues, in the active part of the soul. So this now we're talking indirect, like we spoke about before.
Sorry, I didn't pick that up, Rabbi. What was that?
The part of the soul that's where sensation lies, that can be used, that he said is under our control. We are able to have control over there. We have mitzvos and averos in that area. We can use that area. We're talking about malos. There, they are just used to create malos in character. Seeing and hearing and touch and smell and taste, right? They don't have virtues and vices in and of themselves. They can be sharper or less sharp and so on, but that has no value content. They do their job better or not. But the character traits that you have value, and you can use the sensing part of the soul as a means for the process of affecting your character. Right? So we say, what you see affects what you think, and what you think affects your feelings and all the rest. And there are many, many virtues in this area of action, like precious. Precious means restricting what you take from the world, not taking blindly what you want at the moment, what you desire, but evaluating what its effect will have on you. And in general, the Shlonim Chasidim have a motto: if you want it, don't take it. And I suppose you can elaborate it. If you want it, and then after inspection in yourself, the only reason you have for taking it is that you want it, then don't take it. If you want it, and then you figure out, oh yeah, but it's good for my nutrition, or my father told me to do it, or so on and so on. So then, wanting it wouldn't tell you not to do the right thing. But if the wanting is all that's behind it, almost always you should tell yourself no. So that's precious. Nedivus means generosity. Tzedek, which means justice, righteousness. Vatronus means being willing to give up in a struggle, being willing to give up in a competition. Simply say, you take it.
So what's that called, Rabbi?
Vatranas.
Vatronis.
Yeah, levater. The famous Gemara says, Ha'omer, Kodesh Baruch Hu, Vatran, Yivatu Me'ohi. Someone who says that a person does a transgression and he has on schedule a punishment, he says, yeah, but Kodesh Baruch Hu will overlook it. He'll give up on it. Such a person should lose his life. Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't forget and doesn't overlook. You could do tshuva. If you do tshuva, that will stop the punishment. But to say that Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't, would just give up on it, but vatranis in interpersonal relations is often a very good thing. One second. Anova, which we could talk about, sometimes translated humility, but it's a very complex and subtle concept. Histapkus b'muat, which means making do with what you have, not envying having more, not thinking of yourself as unfortunate because you don't have more. I can't read this right. To uzah sounds like to me like it's boldness. It's amtus. You can make great efforts, and others like them. There are many character traits which are valuable, and it's a mala to have them. And the demerits, the chesronos, the ones that are lacking and are unfortunate. Okay, now he's coming to an idea, which I'm just going to mention, and then I have to talk about detail. The Rambam sees character traits on a spectrum. And the spectrum has two extremes, and the spectrum is more and less of X. There's a single X. One extreme is an overabundance of X, and the other extreme is too little X, and somewhere near the middle is the appropriate amount of X. So, for example, let's take generosity. There is the giving, the willingness to give, the desire to give. Well, there are people who give away everything, and they live with nothing. That's totally inappropriate. There are people who hoard everything for themselves. That's also inappropriate. Those are the two extremes of the giving spectrum. And somewhere in the middle, there's judicious investment, where the question is, something's for sale, and you have money, and you have your situation in life, and you ask, is this the best I can do with my money to improve my situation in life? So many character traits are on a spectrum like that. And of course, both extremes are bad, and somewhere near the middle, because there's a certain complexity there, is where a person belongs. And now the superficial scholar says, oh, I know where he got that from. He got it from Aristotle. Aristotle's golden mean. Yeah, except that in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam has two exceptions, he says. There are two exceptions where you don't go for the mean, the middle, not at all. One is anger, and the other is pride. And he says, anger is found in the writings of the Talmudic sages, and pride is found in the verses of the Torah, that you should have as little of them as possible. And I think the Rambam is waving the flag, and he's saying, yeah, the idea of the golden mean is an interesting idea, and it works where it works, but where it contradicts Torah, then it's wrong, capital W. I'm not following Aristotle, I'm not allowing Aristotle's authority. He has no authority for me. And if he contradicts the written Torah, he's wrong. And if he contradicts the oral Torah, he's wrong. He's just wrong, that's all. And the right midos to have aren't the golden mean midos, but rather, in this case, the extreme of deprivation, as little as possible. So there's another example where the Rambam certainly doesn't accept Aristotle as an authority, among many. Okay, so this idea of the how he uses the spectrum, that we'll have to talk about next week. Yeah.
I remember before that maybe humility would be an extreme. But that's obviously the opposite of pride.
So it's a very tricky question. First of all, in the rabbinic literature, there's anova and there's shval ruach, having a lowly spirit. They aren't the same. So you have to know what the difference is. Then you have to know what the definition of humility is. Ramchal, in Mesilas Yesharim, says something which might be a little surprising. Humility means I'm not worthy of praise for my great qualities. And pride is, I am worthy of praise for my great qualities. And that means, according to Ramchal, if you don't think you have great qualities, you're not in the ball game. You're neither humble nor proud. And the background for that is the famous adage which we teach our 6-year-olds, God don't make junk. So you're not junk. So it's a complicated issue. What exactly the Rambam means by another, something maybe we'll see.